as long as I can remember, the only thing I ever wanted to do in my life was be a mom. When I was a toddler, the only toys I would play with were my baby dolls. I took them everywhere. When my younger siblings were born, I wanted to do everything from changing their diapers to trying to feed them. One time I tried to give my baby brother a bath and he almost drowned. After that, I wasn't allowed to play mommy. When most girls were talking about college and a career, my dream was to be a stay at home mom and raise a family. I went to college and majored in teaching. I have no desire to teach other people's kid, but I want to be qualified to homeschool if I needed to be. You never know if a teacher is going to be mean to my little angel or some bullies might be jealous of their popularity and good looks. While at college, I met the love of my life, Tim, and we were married after we graduated. We immediately started trying to have a baby together. Month after month went by and I never got pregnant. I kept track of my calendar to know which days of the month I'd be most fertile. We had sex in every position possible that may help you get pregnant. I even ate weird exotic fruits from South America that are supposed to help. No matter what we did, I could never get pregnant. After a year or so of trying, I made Tim go get his sperm checked out. There was no doubt in my mind it was his fault. I loved Tim, but if he couldn't get me pregnant, then we'd have to divorce. I was made to be a mom. The test came back and his sperm count was normal. I was heartbroken. This must mean there's something wrong with me. What if God had made me infertile and I couldn't have children of my own? This can't be real. I got myself checked out, and some issues might cause getting pregnant to be very difficult for me. I'll not go into the specifics, but good news was that it was not impossible. I could still get pregnant. I was relieved. My reason for being born to be a mom was still a possibility. With the help of fertility doctors, I got pregnant. The first time I saw the pregnancy test have a plus mark on it was one of the happiest days of my life. I'm ashamed to admit this, but I was happier on that day than on my own wedding day. It's nothing against Tim, but having a baby meant everything to me. A few weeks later, I lost the baby. I had a miscarriage. All the happiness I experienced when I was pregnant got replaced tenfold by the sadness of losing the baby. I fell into a deep depression and came close to ending my life. The only thing that kept me alive was the thought that we could try again. We tried again. We got pregnant four more times, and four more times I lost the baby. Words cannot describe the pain and despair I felt every time it happened. Some things you have to experience to understand how it feels, both good and bad, but I don't wish this pain on anybody. As we're reaching the end of my rope, we talked to the doctors and they told me I can never have a baby of my own. It wasn't my fault, it's just the way I was made. I had been betrayed. They told us we could look into adoption. Tim and I talked many nights about it. We knew how much being a mother meant to me and pushed for us to just adopt. I loved him, but he didn't understand being pregnant and birthing a child you made in your own body was an important bond I urged for. It's more than just having a baby to take care of, but also to get to see the ultrasound, feel the baby move, to sing at night while it was in my stomach, and to give birth. Being pregnant meant a lot to me, almost as much as having the baby. I wanted to try one more time, and if it failed, we would adopt. Against the doctor's recommendations, we got pregnant again. I was high risk and I made myself bedridden for everything except doctor's appointments and showering. I did everything in my power to make sure the pregnancy would last the entire 9 months. Everything was going well at the appointments until one test result came back saying the baby would have Down syndrome. It was like being punched in the gut. I was speechless after so many years of trying to have a baby and failing. When I can carry one, it will have Down syndrome. We need a few days to think about our options. After sleeping on it, I made our decision. Tim considered an abortion, and I almost divorced him for saying that. I told him I was having the baby and leave if he didn't want the baby. Down syndrome or not, he was my baby, and I would give him all the love I had. I knew it would not be easy, that he would require a lifetime of care, but this is what I was born for. I had spent my entire life waiting to care for a child of my own. Nobody would take having a child away from me. On June 12th, baby James was born. We expected a special needs baby. We knew we would have Down syndrome and we were ready for that. Most people with Down syndrome still have a personality. They can still make noises and follow things with their eyes and even more. My son doesn't have Downs, but has a chromosome deletion. He does none of those things. He's lifeless and has no awareness of his surroundings at all. He doesn't respond to voice, touch, or pain. He's on a feeding tube because he cannot eat on his own. The only thing he does that resembles life is he uses a bathroom in his diaper. People who know me and my struggles sometimes ask me, why don't I just let him die? It would be easy enough to remove the feeding tube and let him pass away. He doesn't even know he is alive. If this was an animal, I would have him put down, but he isn't an animal, he is my baby. Even with all the difficulties, I loved him with all of my heart. They don't know him like I do, not even Tim sees him for who he is. Just because he doesn't respond like normal kids or respond at all, doesn't mean he's not a person. I'm his mom, and he's my son. When he was an infant, his favorite thing to do was sit in the baby carrier strapped to my chest and listen to me sing lullabies. Even if he didn't respond, I know he heard them. I knew which songs were his favorite. I was his mom, and I know my son better than anybody. When he was a little bit older, I would take him swimming at the city pool. I'd put him in a life jacket, and we would swim around the pool together. People would stare since I've never seen a child with disabilities before, but I just ignored them. I would never let someone's mean stares ruin my little boy's day. He also has his favorite TV shows. He's always loved watching TV. I remember the insufferable hours spent watching this stupid Kalu over and over, but he loved it. He started getting into movies like Toy Stories, and we decorated his room in Buzz and Woody. I can't believe my baby's growing up. I'm not delusional, I wish things were different. He has never even said mama or mommy. I sacrifice everything for him, and he'll never even say I love you. It isn't fair. He was blessed with me as his mommy, and I can't even appreciate it. Am I a terrible mother for wishing he had some kind of personality or even awareness to love his mother? Maybe I'm a bad person for wanting all those things. Maybe I'm a bad mom for wishing I could make him more of a person so he could show me that he loved me. I'm a 24/7 caretaker. I have to stay home every day. When I have free time, I love to read or watch movies. One day I was watching a horror movie where the main character became possessed by a demon. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in my head. What if? I got on Google and researched demonic possessions. I may be the only person in history to search for how to get a demon to possess someone. That's right, I want a demon to possess James. I already feel people judging me, but I need James to be something more than what he is. I need him to love his mom the way I love him. If there's a way to do this, I would be a bad person for not trying this. Finding someone who could help me wasn't easy. Nobody is out there advertising on Craigslist or Facebook they can summon a demon into your child. I thought about it and figured a psychic medium may help. They talk to the other side as their job is. Maybe some of them had also had abilities they just didn't advertise for obvious reasons. I called more than I care to admit, and pretty much all of them quickly hung up when I got to my request, except for one. He told me he would not dare attempt something so difficult and dangerous, but he knew someone who might. He cautioned me, and he told me it'd be very dangerous and very expensive if this person even considered what I was asking. He finally gave me the email address. I emailed the psychic. They did not give me a name, so I just wrote a short email. I told them what I wanted to do and who had referred me. Weeks went by and I heard nothing. I had almost given up when I got a reply. The psychic agreed to attempt to possess my son with the spirit. The spirit could be good or evil, there was no way of knowing which it would be. Evil spirits are most likely to possess a body. It would be dangerous both to my son and to my family. The evil spirit could kill all of us or others. It may request impossible things or hurt you or others when it does not get what it wants. If things got too bad, the demon could be exorcised by a team or priest, but it would kill everyone, including its host, before it got that far. It would be expensive, over $20,000. A flight, hotel, and all food would have to be paid for ahead of time along with a $10,000 deposit up front. After the attempt was over, another $10,000 would be required. There's no guarantee the attempt will work at all, but the cost is the same. If I agree, I had 2 days to decide, and 1 week to get the deposit signed. It was signed Mrs. Fatima. $20,000 plus a round trip flight, hotel, and food. Holy crap, I expected it to be expensive, but not 20,000. We don't have that kind of money. I'm a caretaker and Tim supports all three of us. We barely get by. I haven't even told Tim about my idea because he would never agree to it, even if the money wasn't an issue. I have 2 days to come up with 20,000? I did it. I got the money. I got a home equity loan, drained all the equity we had in our house. I got 30,000 in total. I did it without telling Tim because technically the house is only in my name. I bought it before we got married. My credit was better than his at the time, so it worked out better for us financially to have me buy it. He's gonna be furious when he finds out, but it won't matter. I'll have my new son that I've always wanted. He can divorce me if he wants. I emailed Mrs. Fatima and paid the deposit as well as extra for her to set up her flight and hotel. We settled on a date in 3 weeks when my husband Tim would be out of town on a business trip. I did not need him to stop what I was planning on doing. He just doesn't understand what it means for me to have the son I deserve. The next 3 weeks felt like years. So much went through my mind. I tried second guessing myself over and over. What was I inviting into my house? What was I inviting into this world? Is this really what I want? I already spent over $10,000 and there are no refunds. None of it mattered. This is my only chance at being a real mom and giving James the life he deserves. Tim left on his work trip. Tomorrow's the day. Miss Fatima should be in town at the hotel, and she has my phone number and address. One more day. A car pulled up and the door slammed shut. Miss Fatima was here. I opened the door and welcomed her in. She was a short black lady, a green and yellow bandana wrapped around her head, wearing a colorful wrap. She was carrying a large box which she set up on the counter. Good evening, she said. Hey, Mrs. Fatima, right? Yes, are you Meredith? I am, but most people call me Mary. Yes, like Virgin Mary, I see. Thanks, I replied. We sat down at the kitchen table and got to know each other a little more. She went over some of the same warnings she had given me over the email. In person, they were a little harder to ignore. She made sure I knew I was not just putting his life in danger, but everyone's life in danger that was in the house. I had thought deeply about this over the past few weeks, and it was a chance I was willing to take. Where did you learn how to do this? I asked. I learned it in my home country in Africa, she said. I'm not a psychic. I practice African witchcraft. Once my mother discovered my ability, she sent me away. If the tribe had suspected me of being a witch, they would have burned me at the stake. You're a witch? I asked. How did you decide to become a witch? Decide, Mrs. Fatima laughed. Bless your heart, child. One does not decide to become something. One is born with it. So, anyone born a witch can do this? I said. Oh no, child, she said. Was Michael Jordan born able to play basketball? Of course not. It takes a lot of time and practice to master your craft. Your craft is summoning spirits? I asked. This is what you do? Among many other things. That is just one thing I can do. Usually it's spells or curses. Summoning a spirit is one of the more difficult things to ask, and only a few can perform it, said Mrs. Fatima. You've done this before? I asked. I have summoned spirits. I have never summoned one to possess someone else. That is why I explained I would only try. There are no promises, and now it's time to start, she said. The first thing she asked for was to meet James. I took her up to his room and introduced her to him. As usual, he had no response to anything she said or did. She seemed to understand me a little more after meeting him. I think she could see why I wanted her to do what she was asking. She understood how meaningful it was to be a mother. She went downstairs and brought up her box to James's room. She asked me to put James in his wheelchair and move him to the center area on the carpet. She started to take white candles out of her box and set them in a circle surrounding James. When she had him encompassed, she switched out 5 of the white candles for 5 red ones and set them up in what would be a star pattern, a pentagram. She mentioned for me to sit on the bed beside her and outside of the circle. For this to work, I'll need you to concentrate on being open to allowing a spirit to enter. A spirit cannot enter unless it's invited inside first. Once we have summoned the spirit, you'll need to focus on opening his soul to allow the spirit to enter. He cannot do this on his own due to his condition. It'll be tough, but it's not impossible for you to do it for him, she instructed. I can do that, I replied. This will not be quick. It will take time. I do not know how long, but it could take hours if it works at all. Do not interrupt me when we start. I need complete silence and need to stay 100% focused on the tasks at hand. Do not leave for the bathroom or make any noises. Strange things may happen, but I need you to remain calm and quiet, she said. Are we clear? Yes, we're clear. I'm ready, I said. She opened an urn and smeared ashes all over her face, giving her a ghostly look. She then had me turn off the lights and then lit all the white candles. She instructed me to sit cross-legged and try to meditate if I knew how. I closed my eyes and began to try and clear my mind and focus on opening James's soul. She started the process. I open the seance. I call on any spirit to come with me. We invite you into the house. We invite you into this room. I closed my eyes and did my best to concentrate on opening up my house to a spirit. Come to us, spirit. We invite you into the house. We invite you into this room. You're welcome here. She continued for over an hour, calling on a spirit to come. I tried to control my breathing and clear my mind. It did not seem like anything was happening, and then I felt a chill. The temperature in the room felt like it dropped a few degrees, and she continued on. Yes, you are near. You are welcome here. We invite you. Enter, spirit. It's working. I don't know how I knew. The best way I could describe it is when you feel someone watching you. There was nothing I could see, but I could feel something. I tried to ignore the shiver of goosebumps all over my body. We feel you near. Please come into the room. We welcome you, spirit. I command you to come. As she was saying this, a rancid smell filled the room. I opened my eyes, and the flames in the white candles doubled in size with the thick, dark smoke filling the air. The spirit has arrived, said Mrs. Fatima. Welcome, spirit. I took a deep breath and started to second guess my decision. Then the thought of James being alive erased the doubt with excitement. Now is the difficult part, she said. I need you to focus as hard as you can on opening James's soul. We need you to allow the demon to take a hold of him. I can do this, I said mostly to myself. It's for James. We will make him complete. I concentrated my hardest on opening his soul, but I was too afraid to close my eyes. Mrs. Fatima's eyes were closed on her ash-covered face, sitting with her hands out, humming over and over. I looked at James sitting in the circle, lit up in candlelight and smoke. In the corner of my eye, I could see a dark shadow moving in the background. It could have been the flicker of the candlelight, but I believe it was the spirit. I closed my eyes and tried to follow Mrs. Fatima's instructions. I don't know exactly what she wanted me to do to open his soul. I don't even know how my own soul opens. Instead, I just prayed for his soul to be open. Suddenly, Mrs. Fatima changed from meditating humming to speaking in tongues, or maybe her own African language. It wasn't like any language I'd ever heard before. On and on she went speaking this language. I opened my eyes and she was in a trance. Her eyes were rolled back into her head, and sweat poured down her ash-covered face, and her body was trembling. I suddenly heard a loud crashing noise and looked up to see all the picture frames had fallen off the wall. Mrs. Fatima continued in her trance like nothing had happened, now yelling out in a language I don't understand. A sudden chill went through my body, more intense than anything I've ever felt before. Mrs. Fatima went silent. I opened my eyes and the white candle's flames burned out all at once, and the room was pitch black. Then in a flash, red flames rose from the 5 candles arranged in the pentagram surrounding James. I locked my eyes on James, waiting to see what would happen next. Miss Fatima started speaking in tongues, faster and faster. James sat in the middle of the red flames when finally light flickered in his eyes. He turned his head towards his mommy. My baby, my son, mommy is here. I started to get up to go hug my baby, but Miss Fatima waved me away and said, No, not yet, child. I sat down with my heart filled with a new love for my baby. Mrs. Fatima continued to speak in tongues, but I was not paying much attention to what she was saying. James was turning his head back and forward between us. Can you believe my baby is moving on his own? I've waited 12 years for this moment. Finally, Mrs. Fatima said it was complete. I ran to James and gave him the biggest hug and kissed him all over and over. He stared at me with much intensity I had never seen before and made some low groaning noise, but I know he was as happy as I was to finally be able to love his mom. Mrs. Fatima told me we needed to go downstairs and let James acclimate to his new world. I hated to leave him behind, but Mrs. Fatima did not give me a choice. We went back to the kitchen table and I gave her a cold glass of water. She looked exhausted from the miracle she had performed. The ash she had smeared on her face had been washed off by sweat by now. I commanded him not to hurt you and to listen to you, she said. Eventually this spell can and will wear off, so be careful. The spell will only protect you. Everyone else could be in danger if he decides to hurt them. It is as we talked about earlier. She went over a few more things and called a taxi to come and get her. She wished me luck, and when she finally left, I ran upstairs to cuddle with my baby. I cannot put into words how happy I am to finally have a son who does things. I know it's a little controversial and not everybody agreed with my decision, but it was the best $30,000 a person could spend. To go to a son with basically no brain activity and no ability to even move, to one that's basically alive is priceless. We spent the first night together watching scary movies. I figured since he was possessed by a demon, he would love the scary movies. And I was right. He is 12, way too old for the Disney movies I had been watching with him. He is really into scary movies with a lot of gore and killing. Anytime we got to a scene where someone was murdered, he would perk up and do his cute little growl he does when he likes something. It was so exciting to see him show some interest in something. His dad, Tim, finally came home from his business trip, and it didn't go so well. I expected it wouldn't go well, but I'm disappointed in Tim. I spent so much time and energy having sex with him trying to get pregnant to become a mom. When we finally had the child I always wanted, he isn't even happy. Can you believe him? I tried to prepare him by sitting him down and explaining I had made James a real boy. He didn't understand what I meant, so I finally introduced them. James loves his mommy and he didn't care a whole lot for his daddy. I mean, can you blame him? When Tim entered his room, he jumped from his wheelchair and tried to hug him, but Tim just backed away. James must have felt rejected. He started to punch Tim in the face and bit a huge chunk out of his arm and ate it. I've never seen a 12-year-old so strong. My James is growing up so fast. Tim got upset and called James a monster. He's been living with his parents ever since. It's okay. As long as I have my baby and he has his mommy, we'll be just fine. James doesn't talk much, but that is to be expected from a 12-year-old. You know that tween attitude that all kids have these days? It's way too uncool to talk to your mommy. Instead, he mostly just sorts of grunts and growls in his way. I like to just think that since James is possessed by a demon, demon just doesn't know how to speak English yet. I'm sure eventually we'll get there and my James can finally tell me how much he loves me. It's okay. I can just interpret his mumbling growls as him telling me how much he loves having me as his mommy. Kids are such picky eaters, though. James doesn't like my cooking, which hurts my feelings. I thought since he was now physically able to eat, he would love to finally be able to eat all of his mom's favorite foods that I had cooked for him over the years. What 12-year-old doesn't like his mom's homemade meatloaf? I've had the hardest time trying to figure out what to feed a 12-year-old possessed by a demon. I haven't been able to take James out much because of the little possessed by a demon thing, and he isn't used to the public yet. You can't tell it just by looking at him, except sometimes he makes hisses or contorts his face into impossible positions. I told him he's going to scare people if we go to the movies or the mall. He seemed to understand why other kids his age get to do things and he can't. Since I know he's lonely, I want to get him a brand new puppy. Even boys have dogs as a best friend, and it would teach him some responsibility. I put the dog in James's room for them to get to know each other and then went downstairs to bring the dog food in the water dish. I heard the dog yelp from the kitchen and went to check to make sure the dog had not tried to hurt my darling James. When I opened the door, I saw blood everywhere, and I was overcome with fear that this dirty dog had hurt my precious James. Luckily, James was okay and had not been hurt. James was holding the dog to his mouth, ripping out mouthfuls of fur and guts to feed his hunger. I was relieved James was finally eating, and I finally knew what I needed to feed him to keep him alive and strong. When James was done eating, I cleaned up the room and put the leftover dog in the freezer for his midnight snack. I'm just joking. I'll give it to him around his bedtime at 9. I never let my child stay up till midnight. What kind of mom do you think I am? Over the next few weeks, I made several trips to animal shelter to buy any lost pet that had been there for a few days. I'm not a monster. I gave the owners almost 3 days before I would take them off the shelter's hand. It was a win-win for everybody. The shelter got rid of the animals it didn't want, and James got a fresh meal. James always preferred a fresh meal. He would eat thawed out leftovers, but I could see it in his eyes how much he enjoyed the freshly killed animals. I'm sure the warm blood adds a lot of flavor to his meal. Eventually, the shelter stopped selling the animals, worried I was hoarding them and I couldn't take care of that many animals at one time. I had to start driving around neighborhoods looking for animals roaming around. Dogs are so dumb. Most of them pretty easy get into your car by offering them some dog treats and a ride. I tried to catch other animals too. I don't hate dogs. They're just easier to capture than cats, and they've got more meat on them. This worked for a while, but it wasn't sustainable. James was a growing teenager and he needed more food than stray animals I found on the street. I decided it was time for some mommy alone time. Tim was still refusing to even talk to me unless I had James killed or exercised, which I'd never do. I needed some time for myself, so James would need someone to sit with them. I went on Craigslist and found a willing person named Stacy. I didn't use any real names or addresses just to be safe. You never know what kind of dangerous predators lurk online. I met Stacy at a nearby park and drove her to my house. I explained James was in his room and I would be back in an hour or two. I just needed to get my hair done. When I came back home, I saw Stacy's purse on the counter, but she was nowhere to be seen. She must have gone up to check on James, I thought. I went up to check on him and knocked on the door. There was no answer, so I opened. Oh dear, James was eating the babysitter. James was putting the eyeball into his mouth and holding her now twisted off head in his other hand. He always ate eyeballs and tongue first, then the brain next. Those must be the tastiest parts of the people. When James was finished eating, I cut up the rest of the body and put it in the deep freezer. Stacy was a big girl, so we'd have enough meat to last at least a month. That'd give me plenty of time to find some new stray animals. Over the next month, I learned it was a lot easier to keep James fed if I just kidnapped a person maybe once a month. I know a lot of people will not agree with me, but when you think about it, humans are just like animals. It isn't wrong to eat beef or chicken when you're hungry, and in the same way, it isn't wrong for James to eat a person when he's hungry. It's what he eats to stay alive, so it's necessary. In my defense, most people he eats come over willingly to babysit. I usually just go for an overweight prostitute who is more than happy to babysit for a few hours instead of sleeping with men for money. It's not like most of the people James are eating are important society members. I'm doing society a favor by cleaning up the streets of stray dogs and prostitutes. That changed when I was driving around one afternoon looking for stray dogs and saw a young girl walking home from the elementary school by herself. What kind of parent would let their little girl walk home alone? It's extremely dangerous and just bad parenting. I would never let James walk home from school, and definitely not at that age. Her parents should be ashamed of themselves. I bet James would love to play with someone more his age and size. If he eats her, she could be a nice little snack, even if there's not much meat. It would be like a dessert. James should be able to enjoy a dessert the same way we may enjoy ice cream or brownies. I pulled over the car and talked the girl into my car, telling her I'd be happy to give her a ride home. After she got in the car, I told her I had a son who was looking for someone to play with, and asked if she wanted to go play with him for a while. I'll call her parents and let her know she's okay. She believed me and came home with me. I cannot believe her parents have not taught her how to be safe around strangers. I had felt a little bad leading her upstairs to meet James. When I opened the door, James was sitting on the floor and gave out a small growling noise he does when he's happy. I introduced him and shut the door, sealing her fate. I tried not to think about what might happen next. Besides, James needs to have a variety of choices. Everyone gets tired of eating the same thing every day. I gave James plenty of time to eat. I typically don't like watching him do his business when I bring him a meal, that is, still living, so I just checked back and clean up after an hour or so. When I went back to check on James, I opened the door, and I was shocked to see that the little girl was still alive and playing with James. James has a lot of toys he has acquired over the years, and she was playing with them while he watched on in what looked like amusement. I started to cry. My friend James had finally made his first little friend. I'm so happy. Before I had much time to take it all in, the doorbell rang. I answered the doorbell to a man dressed in a police uniform who told me his name is Officer So and so. He was looking for a girl who went missing on her walk home from school, and somebody had reported a red 2010 Honda Odyssey had been seen stopped and talking to her, the same vehicle I drove. He asked me if I knew anything about her, and I told him I didn't. I could see it in his eyes, he didn't believe me. He asked me about the girl's backpack laying on the couch nearby and asked to come inside. I reluctantly told him he could come inside. You can't tell a police officer they can't do anything, it just raises more suspicion. He asked me if I had any children, and I told him I had a 12-year-old son named James. He was disabled. He again asked me about the backpack, and I tried to lie and say it was one of my nieces that she had left there. He opened the backpack and saw it was from the missing girl, Ashley. I knew I was in trouble now. He asked me where she was, and I told him she was upstairs playing with James. She was safe, just playing. I led him up the stairs to James's room and knocked on the door. Officer Thomas opened the door, and James was sitting on the bed with Ashley still playing. Thank God. Officer Thomas called for Ashley to come to him, but James must have thought he was going to hurt her. Protecting the poor girl from the mean man, he jumped from the bed and attacked the police officer. He knocked him down and started punching him while trying to bite at his neck. I screamed at James to stop and pulled him off the police officer towards his bed. James was contorting his face and growling at the officer in anger. The officer reached down and pulled out his gun, aiming it at James. James hissed at the officer and pushed me under the bed, ready to attack. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Ashley jump towards James and scream no. Then there was a loud bang. When I turned my eyes back to the center of the room, Ashley lay dead on the carpet with a bullet hole in her head. James jumped at the officer and more gunshots rang out. James was in midair when the bullets pounded into his chest, knocking him down atop Ashley. I screamed out in agony, seeing my one and only son dying in his room. I ran to James and held him in my arms, covered in his blood as he was quietly passing away. I don't remember what happened after all that. It was just a blur. The next thing I remember, I was in a police station interview room being questioned. Eventually, they made me see a judge who said I was innocent by the reason of insanity. I don't know why they think I'm crazy. I only went crazy after they murdered my sweet baby James. I'm not crazy anymore. I promise, if you approve me to adopt a child, they'll have the best mommy they could ever dream of.